The following is a presentation of Tuning into Sci-Fi TV, the viewer's guide to genre television.
Hey everyone, welcome to a bonus podcast for Game of Thrones Season 5, the finale. I'm Wendy Hembrock, and I am joined with the small council tonight. Let's go around the table and have everyone introduce themselves.
Hey, this is Christine from Michigan, the Mistress of Correction and Consistency.
This is Jesse from House Jackson, second of his name, brethren of the Bruce Bloods clan, master of digression, and lord of depression.
And I don't know how I'm going to follow that, but I'm Lou of House Lou. There's lots of Lou's in my family. And I am the master of Season 5 Survival.
And this is Shannon from Vancouver, Washington, and I am the master of We're All on the Same Page Now.
And I am Wendy, the mistress of moderation and optimism, following a finale that raised a lot of questions. We also...
To paraphrase the show, I think you've come to the wrong place.
I didn't say I was looking for answers. I'm just looking for a little bit of hope, a shred of hope, a candle lit somewhere, maybe, that someone sees. So we will be talking about the finale, Mother's Mercy, tonight. We have some listener feedback to discuss first, which is not all about the finale. First, we had a voicemail from Ronnie, which is kind of a response to episode 509, mostly about the end of it, where we see the dragons return, and I think Ronnie had a similar reaction to all of us in terms of squeeing over the return of Drogon. We also had a question about whether anyone understands how grayscale works from Ronnie that I think is a question that many people have.
Hi, Small Council. This is Ronnie from Vegas, and I just had to call and at least leave a message for people who would understand. I just finished watching The Dance of Dragons about 45 minutes ago, and my heart hasn't stopped pounding in my chest. It really got to me. Wow. And, and I was surprised because, it's usually episode 9 that, is the big episode of the season. And after last week's, I thought, oh, they're going to switch it up this season, and they're going to have it 8, and 9 can't possibly sort of reach the heights that 8 did, and in a very different way for me it did. Then we go on and get to the end with the gladiators and the whole fight and the dragon, and it was just like, oh my gosh, because I have to admit, just the fighting and Jorah making it through all those people. And then when he threw that spear, I did not see that coming with the, sort of with the people and the whole scene. And as things just started to get out of hand, I just knew that the dragon was going to save the day. I mean, that was just a given, but it's just like they dragged it on so long and let so much happen. It's like, when is the dragon going to come? When is the dragon going to come? And when the dragon finally came, I just yelled probably for about 2 minutes. My neighbors must have thought I was crazy. And then what was funny is that I thought once the dragon got there, the crowd would disperse. But no, it kept going on, and there kept on spears going into the dragon. And so when she climbed on the dragon's back and they finally flew away, I probably yelled for about 5 minutes straight. And at that point, my neighbors must have been sure I was insane. So anyway, even though it was, sort of different than the zombie attack, the whole gladiator and the end of this episode to me just ranked right up there with the other, ninth episode of the season. So I just just really enjoyed it and thought it was amazing. The only small nitpick I have is with Jorah and his grayscale, because again, it's I don't understand how it's progressing so slowly. And I thought that once you touch somebody, you infected them, but he reached out to Dany, and so she didn't get it. So I don't understand what they're doing with his grayscale and how it works.
Yeah, I think we're all wondering how grayscale works. I don't think they're going to sit us down and give us a little 101 on how it works, though. I think we're just going to have to figure it out. Hopefully, you have to actually touch the afflicted area for it to spread, or else Dany's in trouble. Of course, after tonight's episode, Dany is in trouble, but, whatever. Yeah, we all had the general squeeing after episode 9, although I'm not sure that's the same for this episode.
Yeah, I was, I kind of, when I was listening to the voicemail, I said no one understands how grayscale works, including George R.R. Martin. I think it works however he wants it to work in the story, and I support that. I think that is awesome. Yeah, who didn't squeal when our dragon came flying in as the scaly cavalry to save the day?
Yeah, the grayscale is it's been left fairly flexible at this point, so we'll just have to see next season how that plays out. I'm wondering if both of Daenerys' suitors are going to end up with it, though.
Yeah, in the book and in the show, they've been kind of cagey about it. So I think our best guess is kind of what Christine mentioned, that it has to be an afflicted area that is exposed to an unexposed person. So therefore, Jorah always wearing his wrist cuffs, his grabbing Dany's hand to not pass it along. But again, that's just a guess. And he got it because the stone men are covered head to toe. That's their full-on grayscale. So again, maybe answered, maybe not, but we know it's probably going to work at a pace that gives it the most dramatic impact as far as where Jorah is concerned. And then as far as her love of Jorah in the fighting pit, not to go too much into last week's, but we didn't really talk about that. I thought those scenes were they were nice in scope, and I liked a lot of the effects. They were rivaling Gladiator in terms of presenting a full Coliseum. But some of the fighting scenes, they weren't as good, especially as what we got at Hardhome or Blackwater or Watchers on the Wall, any of that. I don't know. It seemed like it was too stagey, like in a play combat, not even good movie combat. And of course, Jorah did his Captain Kirk rolling move, which made me laugh. But yeah, we'll see more next season.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking at the time, I didn't realize the first two guys were like the warm-up act. And I was like, these are kind of lame. and I kind of, for some reason, I thought whoever won that battle was going to fight the next people. So when they came out with these sets of, 3 different combos of fighters, I was like, I really don't understand what they're doing in this tournament. But the ending part, when Jorah steps up and throws the spear, initially I thought he was just going to try to take her out. It's like, oh, he was really mad about what's happened, I guess. So I agree, it wasn't the best, but what came afterwards I thought was pretty awesome. The grayscale question, I have no clue, but I have to say after the finale and the way Jorah gave the side eye to Daario, he's going to manage to contaminate him for sure on this road trip. So we also got feedback from Tom Zoller, who is a friend of Jesse's, and he's also a comic book illustrator, creator for Love and Capes, which is a very cool comic if you have a chance to check it out. His question is about Melisandre's magic and wondering, does it not really work? Did she misunderstand what happened? Was it a monkey paw, or was it a case of magic sometimes pays you back in ways you didn't expect?
Well, you know what my theory was on Shireen, and I'm sure I will never find out for sure. And because they won't ever say anything, it probably means it wasn't true. But I think if she wasn't truly Stannis' daughter, then she didn't really have the power of king's blood that they were going for. And the sacrifice was only good enough for one little bit of what Stannis was looking for, and that was to give a brief thaw so that they could travel to Winterfell. And it wasn't strong enough to hold the men in place and keep them a full army to go and fight at Winterfell. Or it's just that the Lord of Light isn't a good guy, which we should have learned by this point with all the other stuff he's done, and decided that he was going to give Stannis just a little bit of what he wanted, and that was it.
Tom and I talked about this last night, and he asked me to get the small council's feelings because did you wish for the wrong thing? They wished for a thaw, and that happened. So he had a clear path to Winterfell, but did she not realize that, almost half his army would abandon him and everything else? So I'm not sure what the right answer for that is. I do see that she got out of town quickly. I mean, once she saw how things were turning, despite what she says the Lord of Light told her, she got out while the getting was good. And I know there's a reason why, and I'm sure it's good for the story, but it kind of was really disappointing that she wasn't going to stick around to try to help whatever way she could.
I agree 100% with the note from Tom that I do believe this is a monkey paw's wish, and that this has to do with the price of Stannis killing his daughter.
Yeah, and the Mel has even said herself that she has not always interpreted the visions correctly, but on the show, what we've seen is that the magic has worked pretty consistently. The question has been, as it is with most visions and genre programming, how you interpret them. And so what she said she saw, first of all, the snow did melt enough to allow them to march forward. And second of all, she said she saw the Bolton banners at Winterfell in flames. Now, of course, that could still happen. It didn't have to be Stannis necessarily that did that. So Mel's incorrect interpretation could be that, Stannis was the Manus and he was going to be the one that actually took back Winterfell. It could be the Night's Watch and the Wildlings. It could be somebody else. We don't know. But, I think they're leaving it open to a little bit of interpretation there. And I do see a little bit of a monkey's paw in causality and the other thing to keep in mind is that if this in fact worked and, it's like powering up in a video game by making that sacrifice, did all of that powering up get expended just on having a break in the weather, or is Melisandre still full of that? Well, we know she's full of it, but is she still full of that powerful magic, and could it be used for another purpose?
Well, the one thing I always think about with Melisandre is the leeches, right? And as far as we know, Balon Greyjoy is still alive, and he was on the list. So I would say her track record is not 100% from the past. And I definitely noticed when she said her vision was to see the Bolton banners in flames. Her vision wasn't to see Stannis, victorious in Winterfell. So I do agree that, there's a lot of wiggle room in terms of the interpretation of what her visions are. And the monkey paw, I think that's definitely at work. It's kind of a common theme with magic. There's always a price. There's always an unintended consequence that happens. There's a lot of unintended consequences in this episode, I think we'll get into too. So great question, Tom. Thank you. We also got an email from Davia in Canada, and it was pretty lengthy with a lot of comments, but I wanted to point out some of the questions, and you guys can take your pick of which ones you want to answer. One was a question about, now that we have Melisandre and Davos, without a leader, do you guys think, one, that Melisandre has lost her faith in the Red God? She looked pretty shaken when she showed up at Castle Black. And who's Davos going to align himself with? Is he going to try to cajole the wildlings to head south? Another question that she had was, why aren't the Boltons dead yet? That could just be impatience or not. Do we think Sansa jumped to her death along with Theon? Also, when we saw I would call it the House of Black and White magic, or the Faceless Men magic, with Arya and Jaqen and the Waif. We saw the Waif turn into Jaqen, and her question was, has the Waif always been Jaqen or not? And her last question is, do we think somebody's going to free the other two dragons that are locked up while Dany's off nursing Drogon?
I'll just field a couple of these questions. I don't think Melisandre has lost faith in the Red God or the Lord of Light. I think she's more lost faith in herself and her inability to interpret her visions properly, because everything that she saw would happen is probably going to happen. I mean, she saw that the weather would thaw if they sacrificed someone, and that's what happened. What she didn't see was that half his army would desert and take all the horses. So I think she's just going to try to find her purpose serving the Lord of Light again, and start questioning herself a little more deeply. Or she'd go completely the other way and go insane. I don't know. However, I want to make a comment about the Waif and Jaqen and whether or not they've been the same person all season. I think, honestly, there's no way of knowing if either of them were ever the same person that Arya met or knew in Harrenhal. In fact, I'm not even sure it matters, because it seems like these people, the ones who serve the many-faced god, are so not their own person. They don't have a personality of their own, to the point where it doesn't matter if it was the same person who knew her back then, because there wouldn't be a connection there. The Jaqen we knew saw potential in this girl and thought she would make a great servant for the many-faced god, and planted the possibility of her going over there and learning from them. And there could have been two completely other people waiting for her there, and they were just accepting of another student. And there was no personal connection there. It doesn't matter to them. They literally are no one and could be anyone.
I don't know what the evil witch is going to do, and I think that's one of the many kind of cliffhangers that the show left us with this time.
I'll take the Davos questions. I don't think he will lead an army of wildlings. And like Davia, I did like it that he asked about Shireen and not Stannis. And it will be very interesting if he will ever find out the truth, because the only person that could tell him is Melisandre, and I just don't see that happening. So it will be very interesting to see where Davos goes next season for sure.
Yeah, on the Davos question, I joked in my introduction that we're all caught up. There are a few things from the books that have not yet happened on screen, not many, and we've deviated enough from the source text that different characters have stood in for other characters. In the novels, Davos does have a mission that kind of takes him off the page and out of Winterfell, and to a certain degree, Westeros, just off the island or just off the main continent of Westeros. So it'll be interesting to see if they do that, because events happen in different order, and obviously we haven't had the Shireen thing in the novels yet. So his motivation and reaction to that is very different than book Davos. So he doesn't seem like the type to be a rally around me, and he's more a good consigliere number two hand kind of person, rather than somebody who would muster an army to go get vengeance.
Well, I was wondering if he would muster an army just to go take back Winterfell. Once, assuming somebody finds out that Sansa's alive, I'll think crazy that somehow Sansa and Theon survive the fall, get aid from someone other than a Bolton after they dig themselves out of whatever they fell into. Maybe Brienne and Podrick find them, or they get to that town, wherever it is that Brienne was sitting watching the window, except for the crucial time when she needed to watch the window. Because I would think he would be able, he was able to find troops for Stannis, so he might be able to find troops for the folks in the, the North, or even if they joined forces with people in the area or something. I mean, he understands the threat that's coming from the White Walkers, too. So I'm not thinking he's just going to, take a boat back home to Dragonstone, right? You're not thinking that.
Hopefully not. Maybe he'll join the Night's Watch.
He'd make a great Lord Commander.
He would. I thought of that.
Yeah, I have no idea what he's going to do.
We're all so lost.
I know. I want to come back to the House of Black and White stuff, though, just really quickly, because that was one thing that was really interesting about that whole reveal was there's just so much we don't know about how their magic works and about how their beliefs work, because Arya basically just did a massive fail on not following the rules and not giving up herself and, might be blinded as a consequence of that, maybe permanently. I have no idea. I'm not sure how you're an assassin if you're blind, unless you have incredibly heightened senses, or maybe they come back when you put on someone else's face or something. But I just love all the possibilities that they opened up in this episode about who the faceless men and women are. The last bit of feedback we got was on Twitter. Ken from Chicago was sending some tweets about the sand snakes, and he was offering some ideas about ways that the show could have done a better job to make the sand snakes either more formidable or more interesting. And my question to you guys is, assuming we see more of them, what can the show do to make them more interesting or more credible?
I really don't have a good answer for that. I maybe do a little bit better with their choreography for starters. The fight scene that we saw them in wasn't very impressive, and I think that was a combination of the choreography and the camera direction. And maybe just maybe they were following the books too closely in that scene. And maybe now that the books aren't written at this point, further scenes will be done a little bit better, not being constrained by what they got from the books.
There is a line in The Simpsons where they say, you know what would have been better? Anything. So I think that's my answer. I think anything will make the sand snakes better. I picked them as one of my top things last time because that was one of the few happy scenes of the the slapping game, and I thought there's certainly the potential. I thought a couple of this, one of the scenes with them, flirting, as he's leaving. But I just think almost anything they do is going to improve them.
Yeah, I don't know where that storyline goes in the book, but it seems to be pretty well played out, unless Jamie's going to go back for revenge. But I think in general, it just felt to me like that whole section of the story got like the short stick of the budget allocation. So if it's going to come back, I hope they allocate some more money to it and hopefully boost up the whole environment of Dorne itself, because it was a pretty threadbare experience.
Yeah, and I hate to see good actors like Alexander Siddig and Keisha Castle Hughes and what's her name that plays Ilaria?
Indira
Varma. Yeah, and the others, wasted, and it was completely different in the books. There were multiple schemes within schemes. I think I talked last week about a whole character, Ariane, being eliminated, and Doran reveals that he was playing a longer game. So, I appreciate when they try to streamline things, but whatever they did with Doran fell flat. And to give them meatier roles and something more important than just vengeance, they played that same, we're going to get vengeance. We're stymied in vengeance. Now we're going to get vengeance over and over again. And maybe they'll amount to much. Jamie's coming back to a very different King's Landing than he left. And how is Cersei and Kevin and the rest of the folks, they're going to react when he brings home his daughter's, his niece, dead body. That's assuming he doesn't turn right around and go to get vengeance, which would be stupid, because he's outnumbered and outgunned and what have you. So, I really don't know. Hopefully, they add some political intrigue and give those folks something to do other than play one note.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too, because especially after this episode where it's like, so they just poisoned her. And honestly, I was thinking, you know what? They could have sent the box with the snake and the necklace in the first scene, and they could have sent Marcella's head in the last one and accomplished the same thing. To me, I was sort of like, why did we even go to Dorne? It was a beautiful set, but that was kind of it. Because you had assassins talking about plotting, right? They were plotting. They're not doing anything. And the couple times when they were fighting was very poorly orchestrated. So, hopefully they won't go to Dorne. Hopefully those sand snakes will just show up skulking around somewhere in King's Landing, which might be interesting. Especially if they're sort of on the down low, taking in all the atmosphere. The one person you didn't mention, Shannon, was Tristane, who genuinely loves Marcella, loved her, and now is going to be appointed to the small council. So I have to think he's going to have something to do, assuming he makes it alive to King's Landing. If Jaime doesn't just kill him. Right.
They're not going to be too happy with anybody that has that last name, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys don't think that Tristane's going to be like, turn this boat around right now?
Well, I was sort of surprised that she was dead before they even got out of the harbor.
That's the thing. I mean, they're right there. They could easily go back and, do something about what just happened. I mean, it wouldn't be too hard to put together that Ilaria poisoned her. I mean, she did give her a nice long kiss. It's kind of written on on her face.
I agree with that. In fact, I mentioned that to Tom. I said that's because he thought that's a weird way. And I said, she could be poisoning her.
Yep. We've all been watching Agent Carter. About that lipstick. And I also want to mention some links of note. As usual, we have a lot of interviews with the cast members, pretty much everybody. The actor plays Dario, Kit Harington who plays John, Gwendolyn Christie talking about Brienne's bits, Amelia Clark and Peter Dinklage talking about finally getting to be scene partners, Nikolai Coster-Waldau talking about Jaime's storyline, and I think we have one in here about Lena Headey, as well as George R.R. Martin talking about Cersei's Walk of Atonement. And for something fun, there is a parody of all those Real Housewives shows on Bravo called Bravos' The Real Housewives of Westeros, which is a little lighthearted and one that's a little bit more serious, and it's more broad about the season overall. It's a Time magazine article talking about critiquing a show versus critiquing the audience that enjoys the show, even though the show might not be all that enjoyable sometimes. So it's kind of thought-provoking after this season.
Yes, if you need something lighthearted after Sunday's finale, definitely watch the Real Housewives video or read the interview with Amelia Clark and Peter Dinklage. The two of them are very fun together. There are a lot of blanked out words in the interview, so that gives you an idea of what they're like together. But if you're looking for something, deep and meaningful, I recommend that Time magazine article about the pain threshold. It makes a good point about how sometimes a show just isn't for some people, and that's okay, but that doesn't mean it's a bad show.
Yeah, and I think, I thought a good example of that is my mom, who my dad was spent 20 years in the military, and she couldn't watch the Lifetime show Army Wives. It just brought up too many bad memories. And so I think that's a pretty insightful article, and totally agree. The Housewives of Westeros and a couple of the actresses were spot on in their portrayals. I mean, they move the way the actress does. They spoke, not all of them, but enough that it is pretty amazing, and definitely worth the time.
Yeah, I would just echo what Christine said about that Time article. That's something that we'll probably devote some time to in a post-game show. But if you have problems with the show, that's perfectly understandable, just like it is for any show. And it's dark, grim subject matter. And here on this council, we've got our unicorn Jesse, and we've got all types of people who react to things in different ways. Just where I get a little irritated is people, if you decide not to watch it, that's great. And if it's outside your sensibilities, but when people go on and on and on and just say, you're bad if you like it, or point out all the flaws, it's like, well, you can just quietly stop watching. It's not Clockwork Orange. You're not propped in front of a television with your eyes pried open and being made to watch it. It's just as easy as changing the channel. So it's an interesting discussion of that phenomenon.
Yeah, and just to add, the show doesn't owe you anything either. So if it turns out that the show isn't for you, that's fine, but it never was supposed to be for you then. So you can't hold it against the show. If the show changed, if it had presented itself as one thing and then changed, and I always use the classic example of a show Lena Headey was in, Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles.
You're never getting over that one, are you?
Because it's a classic. It's the showrunner changed his mind about what kind of show he was making. That I can criticize the show for, but I don't think that's a valid criticism of Game of Thrones. I also did want to point out, you mentioned, Jesse, there were some actors in that parody who were spot on. The Danny one in particular, I thought, was really good at the end.
Yeah, right at the end.
So let's talk about our predictions. This is always a lot of fun. Brent pulls them all together as we blindly guess, although in Shannon's case, he's using some very educated guesses from knowing things in the books. So first we're going to play all of them, and then we're going to go around the table and talk about each one. And we're going to start with Christine's predictions.
Cersei will finally confess. The Sand Snakes will attack the group heading back to King's Landing. Marcella may get killed. Arya will succeed in killing Meryn Trant, but get kicked out of the House of Black and White. Stannis will lay siege to Winterfell. Brienne and Podrick will get in. One of them will die, but so will Ramsay. Dany will release the other two dragons, and we will see the three of them flying free. The final scene will be the army of the dead within sight of the wall.
The final scene will be a field of dead bodies. Everyone we love, everyone we care about will be dead, and they'll all be laid out on a field, and we will fade to black with no music, and we will just have everyone dead. I've enjoyed a few glasses of Tyrion's favorite wine, and I'm feeling more optimistic. So my second prediction for the end of the season is that the final scene will be Sansa Stark holding a bloody knife, standing over Ramsay's lifeless body. Or we could see Arya Stark holding a bloody needle, telling Jaqen that her kill list is shorter by one name now. Or wait, maybe the season ends with Bronn singing. Yeah, that's it. Bronn is singing a song about the most beautiful girl in the world. She's from Dorne. Probably none of those things will happen, but we can only hope.
I actually believe it's going to be a montage cutting across various locations. The first location will show Cersei still rotting in jail against Jon Snow being killed, maybe by Ollie. Cross cut with Daenerys flying her dragon over the skyline of Westeros. Cross cut with Stannis and Bolton engaged in battle. Or maybe a shadow monster will be called forth again.
I think the final scene is going to be Jon Snow having been viciously stabbed, bleeding out, and presumably dead or dying. I think the culprit will definitely be Ollie, and maybe Sir Alliser or some other members of the Night's Watch. But definitely Ollie will mutiny and stab Jon Snow to death. And we'll close maybe with an overhead shot of him in a pool of blood.
First, Arya. will assassinate Mirren Trant, knocking him off her kill list. And she will do it with Jaqen H'ghar's help to change her face. As Jaime predicted in episode 1, all the enemies of the Lannisters are lined up to take them out. And Cersei, in order to save her family, will lie about the incest she had with Jaime in order to protect Tommen as king, but will confess to plotting Robert's murder and incest with her cousin Lancel. And Cersei will either be killed or banished or otherwise maimed. Uncle Kevin will be appointed as Hand of the King. Brienne will finally fulfill her oath as Catelyn's sworn sword and assist Sansa, who will be able to escape from the Boltons during the battle for Winterfell, in which Stannis will finally take on the Boltons and take them out. And the North will remember, and so will Stannis, and place Sansa as the Wardeness of the North. Podrick will also help, but Brienne is going to be conflicted between her desire to kill Stannis, who killed Renly, and Sansa's safety. Brienne will fall against the most unworthy of foes. Reek and Ramsay will kill Brienne. Varys will finally arrive at Meereen. He's going to bring some ally with him. That's what he's been off doing. Maybe someone from Dorne, maybe somebody from another one of the free cities, or possibly Gendry, who he found lost at sea. Sir Davos will arrive at Castle Black, requesting aid for Stannis from Jon Snow. The Night's Watch will be in vehement disagreement over what to do. The wildlings are going to decide to head south. Whether or not they'll help Stannis or help themselves is unclear. And there'll be an internal battle that will include actual fighting, maybe a revolt by Sir Alliser Thorne. Ollie will shoot Jon Snow with an arrow, similar to how he shot Ygritte. At the end of that scene, it will be unclear whether or not he's dead. The final scene will be of Dany. Dany will have nursed Drogon back to health. She will return with Drogon to Meereen and free her other two babies on lockdown, Rhaegal and Viserion. She will prove she's the right kind of terrible, and she and her 3 dragons will roast all the former slave owners in Meereen and destroy the Colosseum. Then the 3 of them are going to fly away as the final image in the finale.
Honestly, at first when we were given this assignment, I was like, oh no, I still haven't studied for this. And it took me most of the week to really come up with something because my brain just wasn't in the right place. And it literally took me watching the Next Time On, which didn't really show me much, but kind of got my brain working. And I had quite a few things right there. And some of them were kind of half right. But it felt like the longer I talked, the more wrong I was getting. And maybe I should have stopped while I was ahead.
Yeah, I thought you did great. And, you got more than you didn't get. So, and I'm just impressed, I'll say this because I'll keep repeating it, how thoughtful everyone was on their predictions. Because I had no idea, so I just went for the laugh. And, so great job.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we kind of had one. I think everybody kind of knew one or touched upon the one prediction. But you kind of want to see. I was kind of hoping for something different. And I think that's what was fueling a lot of what the other people were doing as well. So, good job.
Not much to add to that. I would just agree that it's a difficult place to be in, trying to guess what's going to happen and not knowing where the story is taking you. Sometimes there are things that are heavily foreshadowed and other times they're not. So it's always fun to hear what everybody says and thinks is going to happen, either from a wishful thinking standpoint or from a trying to read the tea leaves standpoint.
Well, I really liked Christine's prediction about the three, that we were going to see them fly away on the three dragons, because I had a kind of a similar hope expectation too. And I also liked the idea of seeing the White Walkers continue, but I was honestly doing the math about their budget and thinking, yeah, they're not going to show us any more White Walkers yet.
That's a good point. Budget.
Which was kind of, cynical, because from a story point of view, that was where there was a huge amount of momentum this season, was, that very real threat coming.
Jesse, what can we do to bring you out of your slump? Maybe get you some more wine, You were so depressing at first. It was like, just a feel of dead. Everyone we know dead. All dead. Like, oh no, poor Jesse.
He was pretty close.
and here's the funny twist: your positive comments afterward were still about people dying, but the good people killing the bad people. It's so sad that we've come to this with you, Jesse. Lou, I love the montage idea because, as Team America says, you got to have a montage. And I feel Game of Thrones has been lacking a montage up to this point. And you're right, it should have been a montage. Shannon,
thank you.
Quit cheating. You're stealing the answers. I mean, okay, I'm not. Did the death happen in the books, or was it leading to that?
It was much there was no Ollie, obviously.
No Ollie.
And he was stabbed 4 times.
Okay. So it did happen in the book. So basically you had the answer sheet. However, I will give you props because the camera direction was not in the books and you still got that part. That was pretty impressive. Wendy, you had a lot of like half right predictions, like Arya would kill Maren Trant. Yes, that was right, but you thought Jaqen would help, and so that part was wrong. And you knew Cersei would lie, but you like one of the things that she lied about in your prediction didn't actually happen. So it was a lot of, you were half right on everything. So it was really interesting.
Forget for a moment that Shannon used black magic somehow to get not only the ending but the camera angles. And I will take a little bit solace that I did say we would fade to quiet credits to black. So I just had the wrong, everyone being dead. A lot of things that we shared would have been great endings. I would have liked to seen all 3 dragons, and I don't know how the other 2 are going to get released because, Dany's afraid of them. Who else is going to be brave enough to do that? So, yeah, as always, this is a fun exercise to do, and it kind of helps booster the depression of not only the show, but the show's ending, which is even horrible, right? That it's such a sad, horrible show, yet I'm depressed that I'm not going to be depressed again.
He's broken.
You're gonna have to take some downers.
Game of Thrones has broken Jesse.
Yeah, you're truly addicted then.
Yeah. Shannon, you nailed it. What can we say? To get the camera angles, like everybody said, that's pretty cool, and it was really well filmed. So double kudos to you because that really played out quite well. I was caught off guard by it. I didn't think that moment was coming quite so at that time, but that was really well done. And, just to blow my own trumpet a little bit, if there's one season where a montage would have worked really well, because there's these separate threads were all sort of coming to some sort of a crescendo at the same time, to jump from like Reek and Sansa jumping to Jon Snow getting stabbed to Stannis getting, we assume, beheaded. That would have made a great montage, just to jump from one moment like that to the next. That would have been awesome. But, oh well, c'est la vie.
Yeah, when we talk more in depth about the episode, if there was a nitpick I had, it kind of echoes what Lou said. And we jumped to a lot of different locales and to wrap up a lot of different threads or to initiate cliffhangers on a lot of different story threads, which I understand that. And I think they handled about as well as they can. But there's also, a good montage never hurts. And if anything called for it, this was probably the way to do it. And as for the camera angle prediction, no children were sacrificed in order to have that vision. That was just knowing the plot that was going to happen and thinking about how I saw it in my mind's eye. David Nutter and I were obviously seeing that similarly. And it's just a guy named Snow laying on the snow with blood trickling out. I mean, it almost writes itself. And what a way to end the show. And I was, very rarely when you read a book and you always have a picture of a character or how a scene plays out in your mind, and you see it realized in the adaptation and say, boy, they really nailed it. But I'll give the Benioff and Weiss and the directors they choose a lot of credit in that a lot of times what I see on the screen matches or even exceeds what I've seen in my head. And they did a fantastic job with that.
Mm-hmm. A2, Ollie, A2.
Yeah, Shannon, I love that you chose the exact thing that ended. I'm curious if you were considering picking something else, because I had gone back and forth between, are they going to end on Jon Snow or are they going to end on Dany? And it really was going to be a question of like who's in a more hopeful or hopeless situation. So I was about half right on a lot of stuff. And actually, when Arya changed her face, I literally was like, yes, I called it. She changed her face. However, she didn't follow the rules. So no help from Jock in there. And I did call that Brienne was going to be conflicted about, wanting revenge on Stannis for Renly. So, but overall, I mean, I have to say, Brent was teasing us a little bit after he put together the predictions. He's like, some of you are tracking the story at the current pace, and some of you are really leaping way ahead.
I think those would be the people who thought Dany would be in Westeros at the end of the season.
Yeah, I wanted her to buzz. I wanted her to buzz Westeros. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, now that would have been a montage if she landed in the
Wendy,
middle of.
I did actually, to your question, I did actually think about making a prediction for one or the other or both of those, because the being surrounded by Dothraki blood riders was in the book too, and that's where we left her story on the printed page as well. But I was like, what is the final scene of the episode? And so that's why I thought they would choose to end it with Jon Snow, because as perplexing as oh boy, Dany surrounded by a Khalasar is, and what's she going to do? I think the death of a prominent character like that, is the one that they would choose to go out on.
Yeah, I agree, especially after last season's memorable death at the end. So let's go around the table with our short 1 minute overall impressions, grading, ranking of the episode, starting with you, Christine.
It knocked it out of the park, really. There wasn't anything that I can really ding. Even the depressing parts, they were well done. I give it an A.
Game of Thrones is dark and full of terrors, but the discussion with the small council burns them all away. This is a very rough season, but a good season, and I would give this episode 10 bad spa days. Because Cersei did not get a very good spa day. Her haircut and her sponge bath is not what I would want.
Yeah, I would give it an A. I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10. It'd probably like a 9 out of 10. It's tough when it's so dark to really give it a perfect score, but the pieces in general were very, very well done, and it was quite an impressive acting display by the cast in this episode again.
Yeah, I would say probably an A minus. The issues that I had, well, Dorne obviously is an issue and has always been an issue this season, and the pacing that I talked about earlier, but there's no, I think they made the best of a situation where you had to jump from place to place to place and did that about as skillfully as you could. So for me, it worked better as a season finale than it did an individual episode. Because a lot of times an individual episode will hang together and you'll say, we've talked on this podcast about, this episode had a theme of vengeance, or this episode had a theme of questioning authority. And we see that theme echoed with multiple characters and multiple locations. And here it was more a wrap on the 9 previous episodes, so it felt a little disjointed, but a thrilling climax and well acted and well put together by everybody in it. So I'd say A-.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid A. I wouldn't give it an A+ because of the Dorn poisoning part. But I would give it, 9.5 Drogon sleepy grunts, which were very fun to hear. I like that character a lot, I have to admit. So now let's talk a little bit about the details. Give us your highlight.
Well, I'm going to leave the Westerosi version of the Ides of March to someone else. And I'm going to, since I finally get to go first, I'm going to snatch up Tyrion at Marine. And he is now in charge. Rock on. And Varys is back. Everything. You know what? Marine's a good place to be right now. And I want to stick there. I'm not sure the love scenes between Missandei and Grey Worm in the past have really added up to this moment at all. Maybe we're still working on that. But I think what we had in the throne room was really all of those characters coming to an accord. They really worked out what everybody is good at and put them in their proper positions. Dario and Jorah are off to find Dany, and I hope that's not going to be a season-long venture. Meanwhile, Tyrion, Grey Worm, Missandei, and Varys, because he did show up, are probably going to do a better job of getting Marine in order while she's gone, which then begs the question, what do we need her for? But she's got dragons and, a powerful house name. I think it'll all work out in the end. I loved this part of the story. It was the least depressing part of the story, if you ask me.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is one of the highlights. I think when Tyrion says, I have missed you, that I think he's speaking for the audience as well, right? And
of course,
the a grand old city choking on violence, corruption, and deceit. Only if we had someone who had experience, and just this. And I even think the discussion of, Tyrion going, I'll go with you to save Dany, and I'm like, why? What can you add to it? And everything in there worked. And you wish that, West Wing, I want to see that version of them. And I know we won't get as much next season, but I want to see the version of West Wing of them running the city. I think it's going to be
Westeros Wing.
Westeros Wing, yes. I just think this is great.
Yeah, it was a great scene. I was a little surprised that Tyrion was outmaneuvered and ended up being where he didn't seem to want to be, unless he really wanted to be there, and it was just putting up false front. But because he could easily outthink the Jorah and the other guys, so I was a little surprised that he allowed himself to be left behind. But it's really the place where he belongs, and it's going to be an interesting time period if we get to see that next season of him ruling with the helpers that he has around him. So it was a really well acted scene, and I almost squealed when Valeris just showed up out of the blue at the end there. I'd forgotten about him, to be honest, at this point in the season. So it was great to see him show up.
It's with a cast this sprawling, it is easy to kind of lose track of where somebody is and be surprised when they pop up. So that was a great moment. I have never identified more with the character that I have with Tyrion when he's like, I talk and I drink. There you go. That's that was great, and I liked Dario kind of taking charge, even if he knows that he's not necessarily suited for running the country. I mean, he kind of paired everybody off to what their strengths and their skills were, even if Tyrion kind of did want to go on the search for Daenerys. But I think everybody is where they belong. Although I will have to dig in a little bit when the point was, yes, and we need the Unsullied to keep the peace, when we've just seen a whole season of, well, that's not really their strong suit.
Yeah, I don't know if they've established the Unsullied really have the credibility that they were implying. Although I do agree that Grey Worm probably has credibility with the former slaves to keep them in check, so that we don't fall into total civil war from that direction. Sons of the Harpy side, I think, is a big wild card. I do agree. The nice thing about Dario is he does know what he's good at, and he does know what everyone else is good at. So I liked how they were regrouping, without Mom. And it didn't just fall into chaos and bickering, because it easily could have done that, especially with that push-pull between Dario and Jorah that I'm expecting to see as they go on the road, for sure. And I also liked the idea of Varys, Tyrion, and Missandei, and to some extent Grey Worm, as the small council running stuff on a day-to-day basis. That seems like a combination that's really going to work.
Lou, you pointed out that Tyrion got outmaneuvered by Dario. I think what happened was Tyrion didn't really expect to be welcome to stay back in Meereen and try to run things. He probably didn't see that as an option at all. He probably felt he hadn't earned their trust enough to do that. And then there he was, getting handed that on a silver platter. Here, you're allowed to do what you're good at. Have fun.
Good point.
Okay, Jesse, what do you got?
Well, so I'm going to pick Arya breaking the trend of the show by surviving her version of, "Hello, my name is Indigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Because every other time this has happened, the trial by combat with Oberyn, when you taunt your victim, it ends up biting you in the ass. Now, ultimately it did with Arya, that she lost her eyesight, but at least for that moment, she got to enjoy getting revenge. And she got to do it like I didn't get to kill as many as I wanted, but I'm getting to, you were first on my list. And yes, this is part of my prediction, is that she would kill him. I was really worried about how she was going to be in danger, putting herself in risk, with him liking young women. I thought that how she did that using her, superpowers of, putting on faces, the Mission Impossible, superpower she has. And it was a great scene, because not a lot has gone right for her. Everyone's forgotten her. Everyone's assumed she's dead. She's out just trying to, make a life for herself. And she's never going to get on revenge. She's never going to be, the faceless girl. She has just too much anger in her. And so I really liked that. And I'm looking forward to what other people talk, because I'm sure I'll have feelings about that. But that's going to be one of my highlights of the show.
It's interesting that you brought that up, Jesse, because for me, this is one of the segments of the episode where we get the moment that a lot of us has been waiting for. But the way it plays out, I don't think it was quite that aha or, pump the fist in the air kind of moment, because it was a pretty brutal scene. And the amount of damage that she inflicted on her victim was, by the time it was over with, it was just, I don't know. It just took away any of the satisfaction for me that she was, got the first guy on her list. It was a really brutal scene, and I think this is something that repeated thematically through the episode and other sequences as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Lou. Many things that the audience had been saying, give that person their comeuppance, whether it's a good person or bad person, to use broad generalizations, don't happen exactly in the way that you want them to happen. Still, I think it reminds me of the mutineers at Craster's Keep, when it's not bad enough that they're mutineers and they were murderous and rapists and awful people that had been dragged out of prison and forced to serve in the Night's Watch. But in the one scene right before it, there's like a rape going on in the background, a dead body, and the guy is drinking out of a skull. And you go, oh, okay, I get it. He's bad. And so, did we really need to see Mirren Trant be that bad before he got his comeuppance? At least, I was really worried, especially given some of the dialogue around the show this year, that we were going to, last week when Arya got her idea and we saw Trant sniffing around younger girls in the brothel, that it was going to be a totally icky scene. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it was icky when he was, punching them to see who could take it. But I worried that it would have even worse kind of sexual overtones. And it didn't, because she jumped on that right away. And yeah, I may have pumped my fist just a little bit. And it was good seeing her cross that off her list. And as always, Maisie Williams just killed the scene. In addition to Mirren Trant, she was fantastic in it. So that's a good moment.
I also thought that this Arya part was a highlight of this episode. I was definitely glad she got to kill Mirren Trant, but I'm worried, I'm worried for that girl and her soul because of what it's probably cost her to do it. And I do agree that I think there was overkill on how bad a person Mirren Trant was. I mean, did he really have to beat up 3 girls? I mean, seriously. I definitely raised my fist and was like, yes, when I realized, I was like, this is going to be Arya and she's got another face on. I love that. But she was stone cold when she was torturing him before she killed him. And she was really cruel about that whole thing. And I thought Maisie Williams did a fantastic job, because she's all business in that scene. And then when she gets back to the House of Black and White and she puts the face back, and is that the little girl that she gave the water to and did her lie to? I was thinking that's who that face was. Yeah. She had that little girl smile on her face. And then she has the whole conversation with not Jaqen and the waif, and we get that whole next layer of, girl, you don't understand what you've signed up for at all. You don't understand any of the rules, and they have massive consequences. I thought she played it beautifully when she thinks that Jaqen Hagar has poisoned himself to repay her debt of killing the wrong person, and how she's, truly upset. And she talks about how he's my friend. And then you get this whole next layer of the onion where it's like, that isn't even the guy possibly that you ever knew. You don't have any friends here. And, you're in the labyrinth, but you really don't know where you are. So I thought it was really well done. And I'm very curious about where we go now with her, if she's going to stay blind or not, or what any of that stuff means.
I would have picked this scene if I didn't get to talk about Tyrion again. This is definitely my second favorite thing in the whole episode. I was very happy that, yes, she got to kill Mirren Trant and that she got punished for it, because I think Arya is still very much self-centered. She doesn't understand how this place works. She went there with an idea in her head that they were going to train her to be an assassin, and then she'd be able to go out and be an assassin and kill whoever she wanted. She still never really got the point of what this place is. This is a religious order, and you have to be truly devoted to it, and that needs to be your purpose in life. And she still hasn't given up. Arya She hasn't done what she was being told to do from the start, and she just really needed to learn that lesson. And yes, she's blind at the moment, and I don't know how long that'll last, because honestly, it was a magical blindness. It was given to her suddenly. It could be taken away. I just find it interesting that whoever that was decided to trade their life to pay for hers, because only death can pay for life, to pay for the mistake that she made. There's something about her that they feel is worth keeping around to try to continue training, and maybe the point is just to make a point to her that this is what our order does, and you need to learn that.
You raise a good point about Arya's sort of fatal flaws, because she's been this way since we first met her. You know, she's stubborn, she's willful, she does what she wants, she's impatient, she cuts corners, and that continues to be a stumbling block for her.
Well said.
Okay, Lou.
My favorite, this is an interesting pick for me, because what I'm going to talk about contains my most favorite and least favorite moments in the same section of the episode, and that's Cersei's walk of shame. If you know from the last episode, I said I didn't need to see her drinking water off the floor, so that portion of this sequence I didn't need to see. But one of the most amazing things you can see with an writing and acting is to take a character that you have really zero empathy for or sympathy and actually make you feel something for them. Because I thought Lena Headey, who just played the range of emotions perfectly during that sequence, because we all know that she's a very strong-minded, strong-willed person. And when she first started out on that walk, and she looked at King's Castle, and you could see to herself, I can make that no problem. And yet, by the time she gets to the point where she stumbles, it's a real struggle for her to be able to get back up on her feet again and make it through that last section to the actual gate. So I just thought that she really nailed her performance and made me feel for a character that I really don't have any feelings for. Definitely not saying I'm forgiving the characters for the things that she's done, but for the first time in a long time, I actually felt something for that character, and that is an amazing acting job by Lena Headey in a totally visual performance with no dialogue.
Yeah, that's just a fantastic performance from Lena Headey, and so much of it was on her face because a lot of that wasn't her. There's been a few articles today, and I think I'd read in the pre-production they had all kinds of issues with filming that scene because of the nudity required and the location, and also the fact that Lena Headey was pregnant during this. So there was some keen digital work, but it didn't detract one iota from her performance. And Lou, I think you nailed it on a couple of points. One is all the things that you can see on her face without any of the dialogue. And even in her confession scene, to the High Septon, she was just fantastic. And then a character, and I've been on the Lena Headey as Cersei bandwagon from the very beginning, because I think I mentioned before, I didn't connect really to that character other than find her kind of a hissable villain in the novels, and it's much more dimensionalized on the show. And that's a credit to the writers, and obviously Lena Headey giving a terrific Emmy-worthy performance as Cersei. And, just like most of the characters, you could put together a long list of all the horrible, awful things that they've done. And somehow, through strength of performance and storytelling, melodrama, and emotional manipulation in the best way, they force you to care about her. And who couldn't have empathy through what she went there? But I loved at the end when she's wrapped up in her blanket in the arms of like a 7.5-foot zombie King's guardsman. You saw a little of that fire in her eyes, and regardless of whether it's effective or not, the look on her face said, vengeance will be mine. So just a really captivating sequence that felt like it went on forever, but in actuality was, I think, like 6 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, start to finish. But just because of the character suffering and the way it was, meant to put you in that mental place of like, oh my God, what a long walk, and will the anguish never end?
Yeah, it went uncomfortably long. I do agree with that. I do give Lena Headey extreme props because it was all without dialogue that she had to show Cersei transformed, from when she's at the top of the stairs, she's proud, she's disdainful and disconnected from all the people around her. And as she keeps going, she's literally getting further and further, encircled by these people. I felt a real tension, like, are they gonna, is the mob just gonna break out and kill her at some point? She's actually listening to what they're saying, and as it's going along and it's getting worse, it really struck me. It's like, well, what is she being shamed for? She's being shamed for adultery, which isn't the thing I wanted her punished for. I want her punished for all the other stuff she's done that we don't know about, right? So that's the interesting part, I think, about why I felt bad for her, because it's like, well, this isn't the stuff she's supposed to get punished for. I don't care, and I actually don't. I mean, the incest is bad, but I don't even know if that deserves this. Really, I'm a little ambivalent about it. But great job by Lena Headey. I mean, when she finally was like, "You're almost at the door," I was like kind of rooting for her to get to the door finally. And she is torn down. She's almost like a little kid. And I had been expecting there to be some very direct callback to that flashback that we saw in the first episode, but I didn't really feel like we got it. And then once she actually gets through the door, on the other side is Maester Pycelle and her Uncle Kevin, who offer her nothing. They're stone cold to her. And then you have this weird Maester Qyburn who gives her a blanket, and then Frankenmountain picks her up. And that was the one part that I sort of was a little disappointed, because in a way, him picking her up almost like shut off the emotional impact of what she went through almost too fast. I kind of wanted to see her be really shaken by what she just experienced a little bit longer, but maybe she will be when we see her again. But she pretty much put on that hit list face pretty much as soon as he picked her up. So that was my one slight disappointment with the Cersei walk.
Frankenmountain. I declare that he shall be referred to that as that from now on.
What else can you call him?
I'm going to be the heartless one here. Somebody asked, how can you not have empathy for her through that? And well, I'm the one who doesn't have empathy for her. Yes, I agree that adultery and incest probably doesn't deserve that punishment, but Cersei deserves that punishment for everything she has done. Yes, maybe she's not actually being punished for all of those things, but to me as a viewer, she was being punished for all of those things, and I think it was a decent punishment for it. And I felt the walk, while I understand why it went on so long for us as the viewers, I felt it could have been trimmed. There have been other scenes in this show that have dragged on too long that were more enjoyable to watch, but still didn't need to go on as long. And I think maybe just 30 seconds of the walk being cut would have been nice. Although I do give Lena Headey props. Her expressions were wonderful. It was a nice slow deterioration through the walk of, from pride to complete despair. Excellent job on that. And another reason I don't have empathy for her is at the end, like you said, when the mountain picked her up, she put on her putting together my hit list face. Well, she clearly didn't learn anything from it. Yes, it was a terrible experience, but now she's past it.
Not.
Yeah, she's past it, and she's going to go right back to the person she's been. So I can't feel for her. I felt it was an appropriate punishment for everything she's done, and she still hasn't learned from it. She's a horrible person because, well, honest, she's always been a horrible person. She's been an antagonist, been a villain, and the real difficult part about that character is that it's clear she's not going to change, and a person that can't grow is someone that you can't really empathize with.
I don't know if I empathized with it. I was enjoyed seeing. I thought the scene was amazing and full of tension, and I did not catch the first time I watched it her look of triumph when she realized, the mountain Franken monster is there, right?
Franken Mountain.
Franken Mountain, yes. The second time I watched it, I did see that. I don't think it's just with her. This isn't, in a lot of ways, this show cheats you out of a satisfying ending. We really were cheering for Joffrey to die, and then it's like, well, I'm glad he's dead, but was it brutal enough, And maybe that's why I was so happy with Arya's, is it was a brutal death, and I do agree with you, I worry about her soul.
Wait, who are you, and what have you done with Jesse?
But I'm just saying, that, and so, we want Cersei to get hers, but the way they film it and the acting, right, I did have a little empathy for her, and I think maybe it's that sense of justice that she's being punished for the wrong things. And I guess it shouldn't matter, but it does matter to me a little bit. But yes, great point in the episode.
This discussion continues in part 2.
We love to get your feedback. Call us at 206-202-4182 or leave us a Skype voicemail to our Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV name. We have many ways to keep the discussion going on our blog. Drop by tuningintoscifitv.com and leave a comment. On the blog, you'll also find links to the forum discussions and other links to follow our Twitter and RSS feeds and find our Facebook account.
Listen to Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV on Stitcher Radio on Demand. Download the free app today at Stitcher.com. You've been listening to a Game of Thrones special from Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, Episode 45, recorded June 15th, 2015.